Good morning, everyone. That's more like it. So thank you all for joining. Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends and allies, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this morning's event on advancing the agenda for a sustainable future and really centering adolescent sexual, reproductive and health rights. I'm going to dive straight into this because we have to make up on time. So we're really here to center the evidence, the best emerging evidence possible on adolescent SRHR, and we will be launching a special supplement in the Journal of Adolescent Health this morning. But we're also meeting at a time when we have just adopted the Pact of the Future yesterday. A huge round of applause to the member states, the activists and people who got us this agenda. This also builds on the tremendous successes of the world's first and largest global forum for adolescents. Who remembers that last year? Yeah, a few hands, yes. Woo! The first and largest global forum for adolescents ever. And we also want to use this event to center youth voices at the front and start of the UNGA and the high-level political week. So without further ado, I would like to invite you all to engage actively and to really take up space this morning. A few housekeeping rules before we really start with the meat of this morning's discussion. There will be simultaneous interpretation for the remainder of the event. So if you haven't gotten an interpretation device, please get one. And you will be able to access English in channel 1, French in channel 2, and Spanish on channel 3. I would like to recognize and thank our event hosts and sponsors and allies in the fight to safeguard adolescent SRHR, the governments of Chile, Colombia, and Ireland. A round of applause. And last but not least, it's worth just noting that I will be co-moderating this event with my comrade and friend Shakira Chinara, my fellow South African. Yes, South Africa, yes, yes, yes. So jumping straight into it, as is the pace of a fast and furious UNGA week, I would like to invite up the following colleagues and allies and leaders to deliver a few remarks to open us off officially. I would like to invite Their Excellency Ambassador Carla Sirazi, the Director of Multilateral Division, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Chile. Minister. Your Excellency, my apologies. I would like to invite Mariam, an adolescent advocate from Canada. Mariam. No stranger to us all, the Right Honourable Helen Clark, PMNCH Board Chair and former Prime Minister of New Zealand. Right Honourable. And a fantastic ally and champion of adolescent health and well-being, Madame Diane Kete, the Assistant Secretary General and UNFPA Executive Director, Deputy of Programs. Diane. If you'd like to speak from where you're seated, that would be more than welcome, or you could use the lectern.
So good morning, everyone, excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished panelists, dear friends. Chile stands firm in its commitment for advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights as an integral part of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We must build upon the progress achieved, ensuring that adolescent sexual and reproductive
youth leaders. It is an honor to stand here before you today, representing the voices of youth, especially the girls and young women who remain at the heart of our future. Today, we gather not just to talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights, but to acknowledge that young people, especially girls, deserve more than just a seat at the decision-making table. We deserve to be included, listened to, and meaningfully engaged in the decisions made affecting our bodies, our livelihoods, and our rights. As of 2020, an estimated 120 million girls around the world were not in school. And during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, education was disrupted for more than 1.7 billion students globally. And today, we see the lasting impact of that disruption and the disproportionate number of girls still left behind. And yes, the numbers are staggering, but I implore you to remember that behind every number is a story, an untapped potential, a future denied. Education is the foundation of empowerment. When a girl is educated, she becomes less likely to be forced into marriage, to become pregnant as a child, or to become a victim of violence. Education in young men also prevent them from becoming the perpetrators of violence against women. And so even when a girl overcomes all the systematic barriers and gain access to an education, they face yet another hurdle: access to accurate and inclusive sexual and reproductive health information. And this lack of access hinders not just their health, but their autonomy, their futures, and their ability to lead. And so I want you to consider this. Every 2 seconds, a girl under the age of 18 is married. And that means that during the course of this speech alone, approximately 120 girls will be married off, their childhoods exchanged for a future not of their choosing. But we're not here to lament. We are here to act. The Pact for the Future, adopted this summit, reaffirms the commitment to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, as highlighted in Action 8, subsection F. Yet this pact is only as strong as its implementation. We as young people must be at the center of that implementation. Our voices, our experiences, and our innovative solutions are critical. Without us as a method of accountability, these policies and commitments, they're just hollow promises. We need SRHR to be implemented as a part of our daily conversations in schools, in communities, and in government policies. The Pact for the Future promises a world where girls are free to determine their futures, free from violence, free from forced marriages, free to access education and health services. And this world is only possible if we as youth are no longer subject to the decisions made for us, but are partners in shaping those very decisions. And so moving forward, we must ensure that the commitments made in the Pact are met with concrete actions. We must address the barriers that prevent girls from receiving comprehensive sexual education. We must dismantle norms that still allow for violence against women and girls. We must ensure that girls have access to the basic sexual and health services. And we must allow all girls to enjoy our basic human rights. And so today, I ask you not to simply see us as the leaders of some far, far future tomorrow, but as the leaders of today. We are here, we are ready, and we as young people are not going to stop until every girl everywhere has the rights, opportunities, and future that she deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam, for those incredibly inspiring words. Indeed, we are here, we are ready, and we deserve more than a seat at the table. Love that. Right Honourable Helen Clark, if you'd like to speak from the lectern.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Colombia, Chile, and Ireland for sponsoring this event. And happy to be here as board chair of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health. Conscious, as Levy and others have said, that we're gathering as the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly high-level event gets underway and the Summit of the Future has been launched. And we know that world leaders and their governments must do better for adolescent health and well-being. There's already been a couple of references to the Pact for the Future, and the good news is that it does encompass a new, first time ever, Declaration on Future Generations from the UN. And that makes a commitment to opening up opportunities for young people to participate in the decisions which are shaping their lives. That, of course, must not only be a space created at the global level, you know, young people coming to the margins of ECOSOC or the General Assembly or whatever. This needs to be a space created at home as well. And I think where accountability comes in is people demanding of their governments, well, you know, you signed up to that in New York, but what space are you creating for me here at home at the national level, ideally also provincial and state and city and local authority level as well, as we know that so often very little attention is paid back home to what young people need. And as Mariam just said, we're here, we're ready, or words to that effect. We're roughly 3 decades after the Cairo International Conference on Population and Development, and progress has undoubtedly been made for some and in some areas. We know more young people stay longer in school, more have access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, and more are able to delay the age of marriage. But our concern must always be for those who are left behind. And there are many. For example, the 1 in 3 adolescent girls who report experiencing intimate partner violence. And I'm told there's very little progress on reducing that level of violence. As well as the approximately 12 million girls from 19 under who give birth each year in developing regions. And not only in developing regions, adolescent pregnancy is a challenge in my country. It's a global challenge. At around 750,000 girls under 15 are giving birth each year. So this underscores to me the urgent need for universal, comprehensive sexuality education, access to the full range of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and a supportive environment where adolescents can make their own choices and informed choices about their bodies and their future. Of course, young people are making it very clear that they want action now. In the lead up to the Global Forum on Adolescents last year, 1.6 million adolescents from more than 90 countries told us what they wanted. And that's reflected in the Agenda for Action for Adolescents. Young people were demanding laws which affirm and protect their bodily autonomy, ensure access to sexual and reproductive health services and rights, and give protection from all forms of violence and discrimination. And they want to engage, as has been said, with decision makers as equal partners and co-creators of the solutions they are looking for. At PMNCH, our teams worked hard to create platforms where young people and policymakers can come together. And that always gives a better chance of ensuring that the voices of youth are heard and that there will be action. We know that investment in adolescent health and well-being is an investment in the future of all of us. Conversely, a failure to invest will be very costly to our societies. The challenges of high rates of adolescent pregnancy, gender-based violence, lack of access to education, lack of comprehensive sexuality education are preventing many young people from achieving their full potential. Amazing that currently fewer than half of the world's adolescents have access to comprehensive sexuality education. We must not set young people up for lives marked by inequality, poverty, and lost opportunity. We must invest in adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights to save lives, reduce inequalities, and lift human development around our world. That will also mean removing those punitive laws which restrict access to sexual and reproductive health services and rights, protecting against the harmful practices like so-called child marriage and female genital mutilation. All young people need safe spaces, education, and health care. We know that many of today's adolescents and youth are more educated, more connected, and more aware of their rights than ever before. And of course, they offer us great hope for the future whenever we meet, engage, and hear from them. But we know many millions are left behind, shut out of the opportunities to thrive, and that has to change. And by working with young people as partners, we place their needs at the heart of our efforts and can ensure that they have the resources and support they need to lead the fulfilling, healthy lives that they want. So let's commit to making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Right Honourable Helen Clark, for those incredibly inspiring remarks and for your continued leadership and solidarity. It is greatly appreciated and does not go unrecognized. DED, Keita, I'd like to invite you to the podium.
Thank you, moderator. What to say after Ellen Clark? Right Honorable Excellency, Madam Ellen Clark, BMNCH Board Chair. Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, youth leaders, dear friends. Thank you. Thank you for joining us at this crucial moment. It is always an honor to be among people who know the centrality of sexual health and reproductive right. More than ever, let's continue to walk the talk. Our decisions, our strategies, and our collective will can shape a generation in their ability to thrive, to innovate, and to lead. Young people, young leaders are the present advancing at their own forward-looking pace into the future. They are already leading on issues that define our time. And it is our responsibility to ensure that they have the skills, the knowledge, and support to meet the challenge ahead. The future is about engaging with those furthest behind. Let's not forget them, the furthest behind. How do you go in a mountain of Mutupeke in DRC, or in a land in Amazon, or in Fiji somewhere? Let's not forget the furthest behind. Far too many young people remain out of reach, unable to access critical information and services, especially those in rural areas, conflict zone, underserved communities, or in the middle of ocean somewhere. The lack of access to comprehensive sexuality education is a particular concern and leaves them vulnerable to misinformation, risky behavior, and unintended consequences. But having access to it can be so transformative. This leaves adolescent sexual and reproductive health in a state of crisis due to many interrelated factors. And believe me, and I know you know, there is a transformative power in comprehensive sexuality education. Or call it whatever you want if you don't like that word. Be culturally appropriate. But the fact is, it is comprehensive sexuality education. Because as much it is to be culturally appropriate, if we want to reach the furthest behind, but we need to be clear on the content of the message. Comprehensive sexuality education, or bodily education, or education to life is more than just information, it's empowerment. It equips adolescents with the knowledge and skills to protect themselves, to make sure that they can have a decent life. It allows them to advocate for their rights and make informed decisions. And at its core, it extends knowledge about respect and consent, how to treat one another, and increase equality in relationship. This empowerment of young people, both girls and boys, can help address the global scourge of gender-based violence. UNFPA is proud to be working with government and partners to implement in-school comprehensive sexuality education and out of school. What we do, we support the development of national policy and curricula aligned with international standards, providing pre-service and in-service teacher training, and enabling classroom-based CSE implementation. In school, CSE is important, but out of school CSE is as much important, and part of our commitment to ensure that no one is left behind and that we reach those furthest behind. An important part of personal awareness is access to safe digital methods. They enable non-formal and flexible learning environment, diverse and creative curriculum delivered tailored to the needs of specific group. At the same time, alert on the danger of tech-facilitated GBV. Our commitment to enabling every young person to meet their full potential means we are always looking at ways we can bring contemporary challenge towards. One such example is climate change. which is pressing issue on the minds of many young people. We can equip young people with knowledge on how climate affects their lives. They will lead the way. As we move into our discussion today, I urge our speakers, panelists, and decision makers to ensure that our high-level commitment reflects the voice of our young people. The challenges they raise are real, and the solution must be driven by their leadership. Our outcome today must center the experience, perspective, and priority of young people. SRHR in the Summit of the Future is to be envisioned through life cycle approach. If you own your body, you will have an impact on your life, and you will contribute to shaping the present and the future of our world. Young leaders, you matter, you belong, and you decide. I thank you.
Thank you, Dee Cater, for your and UNFPA's continued solidarity and support to young people in the diversity. I would like to invite our opening speakers to transition off the stage and to take their seats. I think we heard very clearly from young people in Benin through the Continental Youth Action Agenda. It's all about rights, choices, and dignity, and I think we're continuing to center those themes in today's discussion. I'm going to hand over to Shakira for the next segment, but before I do, if you haven't yet gotten an interpretation device, please get one. I know many of you were also lured in by the promise of breakfast. You all look like you do need some coffee. Unfortunately, we lost the breakfast chef. No, I joke. Refreshments will be served after the session just to maintain the decorum of the event. Shakira, please talk to us about research gaps and the research agenda. Over to you.
So very good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, evening from wherever you're tuning in from the world. Levi, I'm really excited to be co-moderating with you. It's like a reunion of colleagues, but I see over the years you've gotten funnier, so that's really good to see. I'd really like to introduce our next round of panelists to make their way up to the front. We've got Professor Robert Bloom, and I hope I'm saying it correctly, Dr. Millers, we've got Helen, and we've got Dr. Parna Benati, I believe, who will be joining us virtually. Again, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning. I am Shakira Chinara. I'm the thematic lead on the Action Coalition on Bodily Autonomy and SRHR. And many of you are probably in the room, 300 plus partners who work to advance sexual and reproductive health and rights. I'm also a Lancet Commission on Adolescent Health and Wellbeing. And previously, I was a researcher for a very long time. And so this panel is very close to my heart and very important. We're going to jump straight in. We would like to start off by welcoming our esteemed panelists. And then I'd also like to ask you all by a show of hands to really get us going for this session, right? So show of hands. If you can vote multiple times if that's the way you want to go, but don't make my job too difficult. So the question to all of you is there progress on adolescents' sexual and reproductive health and rights? Yes, there's progress, put up your hand. Okay. No, there's progress, put up your hand. Or no, there's no progress, put up your hand. Just one colleague. And then, is there mixed progress? It's always good to sit on the fence sometimes, but maybe not for adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. So we're going to kickstart today's discussion really to launch, as Levi said, the special supplement on adolescent health in the Journal of Adolescent Health and the focus on sexual and reproductive health and rights. This morning, we'll be showcasing a video to really take us through some of the key findings, which some of you have answered already. Is there progress? Where are we? Let's take stock. So I'll pause and over to the tech team.
Today's 1.3 billion adolescents are not only the largest age group, but also the most diverse the world has ever seen. Over the Sustainable Development Goals period, we've seen significant progress. Globally, child marriage has declined by 20%. In 29 African countries, researchers have reported significant reductions in female genital mutilation within a single generation. Adolescent rights are on the agenda in many countries, and we have a greater understanding of how laws and policies can advance adolescent health and well-being. However, progress is uneven within and between countries. The percentage of girls and young women aged 15 to 19 who had their need for modern family planning met varies from 83% in North America to 24% in West and Central Africa. And challenges continue. 1 in 3 students aged 11 to 15 is bullied. Among girls aged 15 to 19, 24% will have experienced physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence by the time they turn 20 years old. Globally, 1 in 7 adolescents experiences mental health disorders, including 77 million girls. Criminalization of same-sex relationships in 67 countries threatens the health and well-being of LGBTQIA+ adolescents. We've seen a dramatic rise in opposition to comprehensive sexuality education. Insufficient investment has been made in adolescents' health and well-being. We need to act now. The potential cost of inaction is estimated at a staggering $4.1 trillion per year. Programs, services, and research should be tailored to young people in all our diversity. Nothing about us without us. Adolescents of all ages must be involved meaningfully. We must act now to make a difference in the lives of adolescents today and build a brighter, healthier, and more sustainable future.
So that's really a snapshot of the different articles in the Journal of Adolescent Health in this special supplement. I do encourage you to go and have a read. We'd like to congratulate all of the authors, some of you who are with us today and many of you who are joining us online. So a big round of applause for all of you. And we'll now jump into really the meat of today's discussion, and sorry to those who are vegetarian, but essentially we'll be touching on the latest evidence, why the evidence continues to be important within this pact of the future as we've been discussing, but also beyond that. And we'll turn first to our distinguished professor, Robert Bloom from Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Bloom, you've had a really long career, but you've also been at the inception of so much of the evidence on adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. Could you take us through more about the issue, how it came about, and what's its contributions going forward? Get this microphone, it might be easier.
Good morning. I've had the pleasure, as well as the responsibility, of collaborating with a colleague of mine, Chandra Mouli, at the World Health Organization, to develop a process of stock taking that has resulted in this special supplement. If you haven't seen it, copies are available outside, and today is a launch of that work. Let me just frame what we're going to be talking about. 30 years ago, the United Nations convened the International Conference on Population and Development, which for the first time emphasized the importance of adolescence and established a rights-based approach to sexual and reproductive health. That approach represented a dramatic shift away from population control to the empowerment of girls and women and couples to control their reproductive futures and make their own sexual and reproductive health decisions. While UN agencies have long prioritized adolescents, until 2010, the focus was on those of reproductive age, 15 years and above. There were prevailing notions that you can't work with younger adolescents, parents won't allow it, kids won't speak to you. There were 1,000 reasons why younger adolescents were excluded. In 2010, HRP convened a panel that, among other things, said we need to include all adolescents. We need to focus on those from 10 to 14 and 15 years of age, long before they engage in sexual relations, as they develop human relations. Since that time, there has been an explosion of research in services and policies related to adolescents, and very much inclusive of young adolescents. Today, it is no longer acceptable to speak of sexual health and behaviors without discussing the contexts in which young people live, the social, political contexts, economic, educational, and environmental contexts of their lives. The papers that are being launched today in the Journal of Adolescent Health provides data, evidence of what makes a difference. It has compiled this work and has looked at those changes over the past 15 years. As the opening cartoon segment indicated, we have made great advances. And I think it's critically important to acknowledge that we have made those advances, because all too often people throw up their hands and say, oh, these are big problems, nothing can be done. Nothing is farther from the truth. Since 2010, female genital mutilation has declined dramatically, not marginally, dramatically. Child marriage is down. HIV transmission is down. Adolescent childbearing is dramatically reduced. Enrollment and attendance in school has increased around the world, and poverty, extreme poverty, has declined substantially, even though the COVID pandemic has shifted the progress that we were seeing before the pandemic. And I would just want to mention that while the conversations around sexual and reproductive health tend to focus on girls and women, boys and men are doing terribly, terribly. If you grow up in extreme poverty, no one is advantaged. Boys aren't, and girls aren't advantaged. We have learned a lot about what puts young people at risk, but we also have learned what protects young people from harm. And today, we have a much more inclusive approach, not only in thinking about the entire age spectrum of 10 to 19, but we also have a more inclusive approach for those who are ethnic, linguistic, and sexual minorities. We've gained a better understanding of how laws and policies can advance adolescent health and well-being. And we know more than we did a decade ago about some of the unanticipated consequences of laws and policies While significant progress has been made, there's a long distance to go to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Critical research undertaken with and by young people themselves is critically important to understand adolescent outcomes and adolescent priorities across diverse contexts. There's a pressing need for more longitudinal studies that seek to understand the developmental trajectories and identify critical points of intervention. Implementation science must be leveraged to determine how best to scale up evidence-based programs and policies. Importantly, efforts to improve laws and policies impacting adolescent health must be redoubled. Comprehensive sex education should be expanded and strengthened to promote social norms that foster gender equality. Health systems and services must be adapted to be more responsive to the unique needs of adolescents, with particular attention, as our colleagues in the first panel said, to those who are most disadvantaged. And critically, meaningful youth engagement must be prioritized across research, programming, and policy making to allow adolescents to actively engage in shaping their own futures. In the decade ahead, the international community must build upon the progress and lessons of the past to accelerate action in adolescent health and well-being. We know a lot today about what works. We don't know everything, but we know a lot. And it is our obligation to base our policies, our programs, our services based on what we know makes a difference and not on what we feel makes a difference. It's toward this ambitious goal of creating a future in which every adolescent is able to realize their full potential. That is our goal. And it's towards this ambitious and essential goal that our collective efforts must be directed as we look to 2030 and beyond. Thanks.
Professor Bloom, you have to be a professor to be able to give a masterclass in such a short period of time. So thank you. But you also raised a really critical point, and that's the International Conference on Population and Development, but also the Beijing Agenda. And 30 years ago, I can't remember which speaker had said it. I heard it yesterday, but 30 years ago, essentially, the world found common ground to adopt a really progressive agenda, which is now no longer the case. And so you really pointed us towards that and the importance of the evidence in taking forward these important declarations. I'm now going to shift in this fireside chat to our esteemed panelist, Dr. Melis Kizilkan. Melis is with the International Association of Adolescent Health. I believe you're also an associate professor. You work on adolescent medicine. You're a supervisor of doctoral students. That is incredible. And you're based at Hacettepe University in Turkey. Dr. Melis, welcome. The question to you really, and in the supplement, you've written about emerging practitioners, emerging professionals, and how they take the adolescent sexual and reproductive health agenda forward. In your view, could you provide an overview in terms of what you've outlined in the supplement? What are the main findings? And given the fact that you're talking about young professionals, we're talking about a progressive agenda, young people who are paid, young people's work who's professionalized. How can we support them getting into this space? Your 3 minutes starts now. Sure. Sorry, I was just avoiding shifting because I have a foot fracture, so I don't want to walk up and down too much. Sorry for that. Okay.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, and youth leaders. As an emerging professional in adolescent health from a developing country, I'm very excited and honored to present the perspectives of my esteemed colleagues and myself on a topic that is crucial for our future, advancing adolescent health and how emerging professionals can play an important role in this progress. Today's adolescents, despite numerous global challenges, are rising as transformative leaders. As emerging professionals, we are profoundly inspired by adolescents, by their resilience, agency, and leadership, as well as by the scientific and political efforts driving adolescent health forward. Yet, we must intensify our initiatives to overcome barriers, especially in research and policy. As emerging professionals, we are really trying to engage adolescents meaningfully in all conversations. We are in full support of that. Meaningful engagement of adolescents from diverse contexts is really, really important. Adolescents living in diverse, I'm so sorry. The first key issue is ensuring the meaningful engagement of adolescents at every stage of research and policy making. This will not only enhance the impact, but also ensure that the outcomes effectively address adolescents' needs. Youth participation in research and policy is achievable through intersectoral collaboration, long-standing research partnerships, and strong academic and governmental leadership. Additionally, it is crucial to look beyond Western-centric perspectives and represent the diverse experiences and diverse experiences of adolescents globally across all ages, genders, cultural backgrounds, and languages. This approach is crucial in areas of health that are socio-culturally stigmatized and for adolescents living in low-resource and humanitarian settings. The second critical issue is the need to expand and strengthen the global adolescent health workforce. Currently, areas of the world with some of the greatest adolescent health needs have the fewest resources to meet those needs. Emerging professionals in these areas frequently serve as the sole providers of essential adolescent health services, tailored to meet the unique needs of young people by providing confidential care that promotes their physical and mental health and well-being. Becoming competent in delivering these services requires not only a significant investment of time and resources, but also a strong intrinsic motivation. If emerging professionals are to continue advancing adolescent health, we need further investment in education and training, leadership and skill development, and mentorship and guidance opportunities. Additionally, building the research capacity of emerging professionals living in limited resources areas is crucial to generate evidence for effective local and global policies. Academic institutions, national and global leaders, non-governmental organizations, government agencies, scientific communities, and other stakeholders can play a pivotal role in empowering emerging professionals. The International Association for Adolescent Health, WHO, the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health, and the Second Lancet Commission on Adolescent Health and Wellbeing, and the Journal of Adolescent Health, with the special issue, are prominent examples. They demonstrate how networking, mentorship, and leadership development opportunities can foster the growth of emerging professionals from diverse contexts and include them in global discussions. To conclude, emerging professionals are uniquely positioned to serve as a bridge between adolescents and experts. With our efforts and insights valued, we can transition to leadership roles to advance adolescent health on local, national, and global scales. By prioritizing meaningful adolescent engagement and empowering emerging professionals, we can bridge gaps together, ensuring that all young people can thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Melis. And again, I do apologize to my fellow panelists. I'm a bit wobbly at the moment, so thank you for your understanding. We're going to shift now to Dr. Helen Habib from the Africa Population Health Research Center. Dr. Helen, Your 3 minutes will be around giving us a snapshot into the supplement, a snapshot of the findings in the African region. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Shakira. Good day, Your Excellencies, delegates, and colleagues. It is really an honor for me to be here on behalf of all my collaborators who work together on developing the supplement, which is a really critical body of work in understanding the status of sexual and reproductive health among adolescents. So for us, we conducted a scoping review of the literature on young adolescents, specifically those who are between the ages of 10 to 14 years, because we've come to realize in looking at human development that that is a very critical stage and has implications further on in the life course. So we looked at the available literature from the past decade, and we did this within the lens of the socio-ecological framework. So we looked at individual level factors, factors at the interpersonal level, that's between adolescents, their peers, and their families. We also looked at factors within the context of schools and communities, and then also broader structural issues like policies and laws and technology and artificial intelligence and that kind. So what we found is that there is an abundance of literature on sexual and reproductive health for early adolescents. However, when we take a very close look at the data, in terms of geographical distribution, most of the evidence comes from high-income contexts. So in areas where we have the highest burden of adolescent health challenges, there really is very little evidence, and that's a very critical geographical gap. Also, in terms of measurements, we find that most of the research is cross-sectional in nature, which is very beneficial if we want to have a snapshot of adolescent health status. But it limits us in following the pathways of causality. So even though we may know what is going on now, it's very hard to follow on later on in the life course, the implications for adolescent health. Also, we realized that most of the research is risk-oriented because it looks at issues like gender and social norms, sexual behaviors, intimate partner violence. And it's really important to understand what has negative implications for adolescent health. But it also means that we're missing out on a really great opportunity to pursue the factors that have been shown to work to promote the health of adolescents. So we are missing out on following through with protection, and we are focusing more efforts on risk, which is a really huge gap for us. Also, because we disaggregated the evidence at different levels, at the individual level, interpersonal level, and so on, we found that there's quite an amount of literature on individual level factors, adolescents in their individuality, also in their relationships with other people. But when you move further on to the school context or the community context, there's really very little to go by. And interestingly, we found that we couldn't really find much evidence on broader social structures, like issues like policies and laws specifically targeted at young adolescents, which Robert spoke about earlier. So that is really a massive gap, especially in the context of why we are here today at the high level. So based on these findings, we made recommendations for the next decade, which we hope will be implemented. And in terms of research, we really would like to see a redirection of resources towards actually having more research in the context where there are higher burdens of adolescent sexual and reproductive health challenges, lower income context, and especially in the face of ongoing humanitarian crisis, we would like to see much more research coming from those contexts. Also, in terms of implementation, it's really time that we focus more on promoting the factors that work. The programs and the strategies that have shown, that have demonstrated to work in the past, we really need to hone down on those and pursue that in the coming decade. Also, in terms of policy at a high level, which is very important and has come up several times, we really need to center adolescents. They need to be at the center of everything that we do, the decisions that we make, And we need to look at the implications of these high-level issues on the lives of adolescents. And whilst we do that, let's keep in mind that nothing about us without us. So we hope that these recommendations will be followed through in the next decade. Thank you, Shakira.
Thank you, Dr. Habib. You brought my favorite phrase back into the room. We're now going to shift to Dr. Prerna Banati, who I believe is joining us online and couldn't be with us in person. And we wish that you were, Prerna. We're going to allow you to bring this panel to a close and essentially share with us, given your work at the World Health Organization, given your contribution to this special supplement on adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, what's working and what are the gaps? So over to you.
Thanks so much, Shakira, and thanks. And it's really lovely to be part of this amazing panel. I'm really delighted to represent WHO, in fact, one of 2 departments at WHO who contributed to the special supplement and who are co-hosts of this event today. So my name is Prerna Banati. I'm an adolescent health and development scientist. And I'm really happy to share with you a little bit about what we've supported in the supplement, what we provided for the supplement on what works to improve adolescent SRH and well-being. And as Bob said so eloquently, more than ever before, we really know what works to support adolescents. And so I'll share with you just a few highlights that have been drawn from the issue today. So increasingly, we're seeing successful quality intersectional and gender transformative interventions to support healthy and positive social and gender norms for life. In fact, in the supplement, a review of these interventions describes firstly the importance of tailoring these approaches for both boys and girls, for recognizing the developmental needs of younger and older adolescents, and the importance of not excluding younger adolescents. Often I think in programming, we see younger adolescents being excluded because people think they don't understand what's happening, but of course they do. And so we should be tailoring our approaches to younger adolescents as well. Incorporating multi-level approaches, so at the individual level, but also at the institutional level, at the family level, and at the community level, very important. And also engaging multiple sectors, so health, education, sports, in a collaborative approach to addressing well-being holistically. Secondly, I think, and we must not forget that schools are a critical place for adolescent growth. Mariam, at the beginning of our session today, reminded us about the importance of education as a driver for the health and well-being of adolescents. And indeed, many schools are embracing health promotion. School health programs operate in over 100 countries worldwide, yet only 60% respond to the development needs of adolescents. So using school health programs and delivering comprehensive sexuality education, we can reach more adolescents and link them to health facilities and child protection systems. So WHO is working with UN partners to support the scaling up of health promoting schools, including delivering quality school health services. And maybe a third example, if I can, about adolescent responsive policies and programs. And again, our colleagues on the panel really did speak to this. We've done an analysis, and what we've seen is in 115 countries that are using the most recent WHO SRMNCAH survey, it's a mouthful, 77% of countries reported having at least one full-time person employed in the National Adolescent Health and Wellbeing Program, but 58% of countries reported having a regular budget for this program. Our paper in the special supplement proposes strengthening policy features so that they are appropriately responding to adolescent need. They're taking a participatory approach to including adolescents from the policy design phase, noting that only 50% of countries at the moment include adolescents in their plans for health. They should expand inclusion and coverage of effective policies so vulnerable adolescents can also benefit, and ensure effective implementation, and as much as possible, monitor and evaluate these. The paper also exposes research gaps, which are critical to fill if we want to advance evidence-based implementation. In response to gaps to the evidence base, WHO is conducting a research priority setting exercise on the sexual and reproductive health of young adolescents, led by our colleague, Dr. Sherry Bastine, which builds on the findings from the special supplement. The purpose will be to inform the next generation of research and programming on SRHR with young adolescents. And it uses an adapted, rigorous Chinri method and works to engage experts and a wide group of stakeholders to assess the outcomes. This exercise will be completed in the early part of 2025, and we really look forward to sharing the findings with you when they're ready. The website for today's events will share with you more details of how you can be involved too in looking at the future next generation of research and programming on SRHR with young adolescents. Thanks so much. Really a pleasure to be part of the panel, and I'll hand back to you, Shakira.
Thanks so much, Dr. Aparna Banati. I hope everyone can give you a round of applause and you can hear it. Before the session, many of you had registered and many of you had submitted questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer these questions, as with most events. But, you know, the panelists are in the room, various of the other authors are online as well, and you can find them, maybe a tea or coffee. The two questions which were posed by the audience was, one, how can we advance adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights in culturally difficult contexts? That's a good one. Not that I have favorite questions. The second one is, where is the progress, or where can the progress be in terms of adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights and climate justice? To bring us to a close, I'm going to do the same activity we did at the beginning, but with a different question. And that will allow us to have Professor Bloom give us closing remarks on behalf of the panel by popular demand on the WhatsApp group, Professor Bloom. So in the room, put up your hand if you're the following, and you can put up your hand more than once if you'd like. Are you a policymaker? Do you work in the multilateral system? High up, let's see who you are. We know where to find you at coffee. Okay. Do you work in governments? Are you part of a member state? Okay. Anyone from the private sector? Anyone from philanthropy? Oh, Linda, why is your hand so low? You're lucky I know you. Youth organizations? Civil society? Okay. So Professor Bloom, to bring us to a close, these are the types of stakeholders we have in the room. I'm going to ask you to pick one stakeholder, just for now, okay? Just one stakeholder. What action would you like them to take from this discussion?
One action. So the one action I would recommend is base your action on evidence. Base it on evidence. Where do you find the evidence? You find it through research. We tend to think of research as being abstract, but I would suggest it's a roadmap. And if you don't take that roadmap, you're going to wind up in the wrong place. And we have huge evidence of winding up in the wrong place, of investing millions and millions of dollars in programs that somebody thought was a great idea, but was a terrible idea and had no evidence, in fact, that it would make a difference. And some of our interventions have made life worse. They haven't made them better.
Thank you,
So
Professor Bloom.
find the path for evidence.
Hashtag the evidence. So this brings this panel to a close. I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Aparna Banati, who's with us online, Dr. Helen Habib, Dr. Malez Kizilkhan, and Professor Robert Bloom. To sum, the special supplement takes stock of adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. The next time I meet you, I'm going to do a test quiz to see if you actually read it. It's really important. As Professor Bloom said, all about the evidence. We're now going to call up a young poet, Cedal. I don't know if you're in the room. I believe that you're a young, feminist, powerful. I can see the power from there. I will now finally move. Cedal, you're going to take us through a poem, I believe, Welcome. I'm going to ask other panelists to leave the stage and hand back to our brilliant co-moderator, Levi Singh.
Few lines of strength for the adolescent event. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The chains have been broken. The chains of predetermined notions have been broken. Notions of the past, notions of the future no longer can be cultivated by the palm of a stranger. The hand, given the baton of right, the hand, given the dream we see, is our very own. Bracelets that subdued us together, bracelets that dampened our minds. Open. Though we strive to pick apart the pieces of bags left in our trail, bags of before, bags of flowers that need to be watered. These trails of the past are never to negate us, but to empower us to forge ahead together in unity. To our rights as adolescents, we stretch out our hands to the right. To our rights, our people are calling. Open. We are able to move. Our ankles are able to stretch. Our minds are able to stretch. Our opinions are able to stretch. Our speech is able to stretch. The chains have been broken. Oh, the chains have been broken. Now I determine my title. Who are you? Who have you become? 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 This thought dances through the ins and outs of my brain. As I stare into the mirror, I see a person who has been pulled and twisted. My inner child interjects, let me out. I don't know who you are. Let me out. I don't know who you are. Let me out. I don't know who you are, she says. As I'm looking into the mirror, I can't recognize myself. Who are you? Who have you become? Something in me clicks. I need to find myself. Everything that I am and I do is a parody of accumulated opinions and trends. Being a Black girl is fun. The glow from the sun, the harmonized laughter, ha ha, not thinking of anything and thinking of everything. My thumb cramps as I scroll, spending time on the capital of trends. as it has deteriorated the progress of me truly being myself. It has clouded my beautiful brain and is collectively leaving me desolate as an adolescent and a person of youth. It is a thief of joy, a thief of joy. My brain continues to get spurts of dopamine rushes until I see someone who I can identify with. I have stepped into the knowing that we are like flowers, but one by one, our petals get picked apart until our entirety becomes blank, becomes empty. Except we do something. Being caged to this mentality is easier than breaking from it. I'm no Supergirl, I'm only a human person. But this thought continues to get overshadowed by outside words that title me a strong Black female. It is draining. It is exhausting. I feel under duress to conquer things others can't. This leaves me in a loop of an unending identity crisis. Revival can come from words. All I need is within me right now. A troth I repeat and have gradually embroidered into my mind. Through this, the thoughts that once swam through my head have all been washed away. I have been inspired. My heights are gracefully chosen by me. It is me demanding the world to grant me the baton. Now determine my title. I will now determine my title. Dew of heaven, in stillness we daily thrive. The counted moment, as the dew of heaven flourished through our soul, to strengthen our mortal flesh, to face and conquer our daily challenges. Open. Thank you.
You can keep the applause going for Cito. Thank you, Cito. That was fantastic. You really had me at that rush of dopamine line. I think we're all searching for that rush of dopamine at the end of this week. Thank you, Shakira, for moderating that segment. It was fantastic, and I'm sorry about your ankle. I'm sorry that the Olympics didn't go as well as planned as well for you. Let's stick away from the high jump. We're moving along to the policy dialogue segment, and I think we heard the world is definitely getting better for adolescents and young people, but at the same time, inequalities are deepening, they're widening, and they're becoming more aggressive. So let's talk to some policymakers and learn about the pragmatic steps that are being taken to sustain the gains and hold the line in a challenging context. I would ask you to hold your applause so I can get the esteemed panelists on stage, and then we can give them a rapturous round of applause after, right? I would like to invite the Honorable Minister of Education and Training for the Government of Lesotho, the Honorable Ntoyo Papa, to the podium. I would like to invite the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports for the Republic of Bulgaria, Mr. Peter Mlendov. Their Excellency Ambassador at Large for Gender Issues and Feminist Global Policy of the Government of Colombia, Arlene Tickner. Your Excellency, please join us. And last but not least, Sarah Hunt, the Counselor for Development Cooperation and Africa Division at the Department of Foreign Affairs of Ireland. Sarah, you're welcome. And now for that round of applause. So let's get into it. I see you all have briefing notes. I think you don't really need those because we're trying to make up on time. And we have holding slides with the commitments that your respective governments have made towards adolescent health, well-being, and development. And ultimately, I think the purpose of this policy dialogue is to have a frank and concise discussion about what's working, what's not working, and what needs to be scaled over the next 75 months to really get us over the line when we talk about adolescent health, well-being, and development priorities. Let me turn to you, Minister Rapapa. We know Lesotho has made tremendous strides in HIV prevention. In 2021, you had reached the UNAIDS 1990 targets. Tell us what you're learning about in terms of strengthening the provision of CSD in schools and linking young people to health services through the basic education environment. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Rapapa.
Oh, thank you very much, the moderator. Greetings to all of you, Excellencies. In Lesotho, the population is about 2 million, and we introduced comprehensive sexuality education for adolescents. It has worked for us, but we had few challenges. One, it was introduced compulsory, but since it was not used as part of assessment for the students to progress, students were not actively participating in that program. So now we are changing to saying that one, it's going to be compulsory. Number two, you'll have to pass it in order to gain access to tertiary education, and including to high school from primary. In that respect, participation will be a little bit more higher. The other thing that is a challenge is advocacy for the comprehensive sexuality education itself to become compulsory. Some other people are saying agriculture must be compulsory, religious studies must be compulsory, history must be compulsory. So we have to advocate to ensure that CSE becomes high on the agenda based on the facts that have been highlighted here. We must have facts and then advocate for it to become higher on the agenda in terms of education. I think we'll go far. Lastly, we have health education in the schools, but the pathways to get to health centers is the one that we still have a challenge. Young youths in our country are not really happy to interact with the adults when they get to health centers. So in the health centers, they prefer to have their corners or some part of the health center which is dedicated for the adolescents. So we are trying to do that, and I think we'll get far. Lastly, we have recently seen a dropouts of girls from schools because of unintended pregnancies. And we are changing policy and laws that if a child, an adolescent become pregnant at school, having had a baby should be able to go back to school without application, without any hindrance. So we are going through a policy, and eventually we are going to go through the laws to make sure that those who had challenges are not left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Rapapa, for those insights. I think that's incredibly useful, learning about not just the context of Lesotho, but also of Southern Africa. I think the issue of girls' re-entry after pregnancy in schools is definitely one that is growing in the minds of policymakers in Southern Africa, and we're keen to learn more about what is working in the context of those re-entry guidelines. Deputy Minister Peter, lovely to see you here. So yesterday, I think Chris Carter had mentioned that it's difficult for fostering coordination effectively within governments simply because there's no incentivized to collaborate and to coordinate. You've been in the development space for years, and your government has made specific commitments around increasing efforts around coordination. Tell us what you're learning in efforts to enhance coordination, especially for psychosocial support and CSE for adolescents and young people in Bulgaria.
Thank you so much. I can call you my friend as our history goes back many, many years ago from the youth sector. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure having be here together with so many youth activists, but also fellow member states and in the international community. I think, first of all, it's very much awakening that this event is happening this year when we mark the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Program of Action of the International Conference of Population and Development, which is absolutely crucial because by far is the most progressive agreement that we made for. And hopefully that yesterday, the adoption of the Pact of the Future, we will be able to continue this more sustainably in order to achieve better conditions for adolescents and young people, especially on sexual and reproductive health and rights. Coming back to my country, Bulgaria, I think it's absolutely a top priority for us investing in adolescents and young people's potential, including health and well-being. Because for us, this will very much build on the existing National Youth Strategy, which is a multi-sectoral vision document that it's built on in synergy with the UN Youth 2030, but also the European Youth Strategy. And since it's a cross-sectoral policy, we aim to partner with different decision makers, also central bodies, in order to achieve this very much holistic approach when we talk about young people's potential. I just want to mention here that Bulgaria's overall funding for youth policy, it's about close to 5 million euros. And most of it, around 85%, it's outsourced to youth-led and youth-serving organizations because we do believe in investing in meaningful youth engagement. And we believe that those are the best experts working with the most left-behind populations in the field. Therefore, we provide two instruments, and these are the national youth programs that we have. And their thematic areas are based on a need assessment. And I go back to the professor who mentioned about investing in research and data. We built our policy on evidence in order to be able to understand what are the needs of young people, but how also they can, need in order to further develop their professional and personal development. In order to do this, we also have built 8 international youth centers in partnership with the Ministry of Education. And with thanks to the Norwegian European Fund Program, which provided the support financially for that. The 8 existing national youth centers are providing basically a one-off stop to provide psychosocial support, international trainings, investing in volunteering, etc. We do hope that by 2026, we'll be able to build 20 more, which will allow us to cover all administrative regions in Bulgaria. This will be also helping us to reach the ones that are living in rural areas, and they're the hardest to reach in order to provide opportunities for them. And we believe that in these centers, with the support of local municipalities, we'll be able to provide psychosocial support, access to sexual and reproductive health information, including CSE, which is so crucial nowadays, especially, and I'll conclude here, with increased rates of opposition towards SRHR, especially when it comes to CSE. So with that, as coming back to your question about coordination, we do believe that an effective coordination lies from a bottom-top approach in order to really be able to reach the most that are in need. And hopefully by the next event, when I will attend, we'll be able to progress some data, how we manage to reach adolescents and young people through CSE in those 21 youth centers in Bulgaria. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend, Deputy Minister Peter. I think an important data point that you've highlighted is 85% of your funding as a ministry going to youth-led organizations as partners. That's fantastic. And I think we'd definitely like to learn more over brunch once we find the breakfast chef. Arlene, Your Excellency, Colombia has made tremendous strides in lowering adolescent fertility over the last decade, 2 decades actually. We'd like to know what's working well in this effort and what has the government of Colombia learned in this approach towards lowering adolescent fertility?
Colombia and the government of Gustavo Petro and Francia Marquez are deeply committed to the full exercise of youth citizenship, starting with the defense of their rights and most importantly, their sexual and reproductive rights. They're also committed to eliminating inequalities and discrimination rooted in gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, disability, and whatnot. The whole of government approach that the government is adopting has been strengthened by the creation of two high-level offices, the Presidential Advisory on Youth and the Vice Ministry of Youth in our newly created Ministry of Equality and Equity. On the specific issue of sexual and reproductive rights, there are key directives that have been issued to allow us to insist on the implementation of different commitments made. And I just want to point out two of them. They're on here on the screen, although no, they're not. Resolution 051 of 2023 and Circular 044 of 2022. We have a landmark decision of our Constitutional Court in 2022 that made abortion legal up until 24 weeks. These directives seek to guarantee the right of youth to the voluntary interruption of pregnancy, consensual, obviously informed, but without stigmatization normally associated with this, right? These policies, yes. These policies have also increased access to anticonceptive methods, which has resulted in a clear reduction in teenage pregnancies. Over the course of 2 years, approximately 20%. We hope to increase these levels towards the future. And I just want to add a final point related to our armed conflict. Obviously, conflict-related sexual violence is a huge problem in our country. We continue to be committed to strengthening mechanisms to combat violence for reasons of sex and gender related to the conflict and unrelated to the conflict. And in this sense, we're in the process of strengthening a national system of registration, attention, follow-up, and monitoring of these crimes.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for keeping that brief yet focused. And I love this concept that's emerging of youth citizenship. I think overlaying that with the adolescent well-being model that has been produced by the 8-6 and others is definitely something to explore further in conversation. And I mean, reducing overall adolescent fertility by 20% is no small feat. So we really do applaud the government of Colombia for their efforts in this. Sarah, great to have you on the panel. Yesterday, I heard from a senator at the accountability breakfast, a senator from Ireland, who said that they never thought that they'd see, number one, abortion freely available and accessible in their lifetime, but more so access to contraception for girls, women and girls, 17 to 25 years old, freely accessible. Remarkable progress in a very short space of time, and that's a testament of courageous policymaking and courageous lawmaking. What challenges have been faced in making contraceptives freely available for 17 to 25-year-olds, and where to from here for this landmark program in Ireland?
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's great to be here on behalf of Ireland at this event. Excellencies, honourable guests, and distinguished friends. I mean, my focus will be a little bit more on our development cooperation programme. That's coming from Irish Aid or from that side, where we have a very strong emphasis on the furthest behind first. And very much that has traditionally translated into a focus on women and children, crisis and conflict affected communities, and marginalised socioeconomic groups, including those at risk of HIV or people living with disability. But we've learned really that we also have a greater appreciation of the benefits and the need for a more focused engagement with adolescents and youth. And it's impossible, I think it was mentioned earlier, to engage on climate change without really thinking about youth as central stakeholders in that. And you've mentioned there Ireland's renewed and revitalised approach to sexual and reproductive rights and health. And this very much does build off the changes in our domestic legislation. And what I would flag in that is that those changes were driven by an engaged, passionate and youthful electorate. and that the messages communicated could not have been clearer. Sexual and reproductive health and rights are important, and that these are issues that young people and adolescents are willing to engage with, often passionately, and on which they will vote. And these domestic changes have been accompanied, and you've mentioned there, in new developments in the SRHR agenda, and in particular, since 2022, the government has introduced a free contraception scheme for young people aged 17 to 25 years old. And it has since been expanded, and there's ongoing discussions around that domestically. But I would say again that the initial intervention was informed by a clear, evidence-based assessment of need and demand. And what we've been able to do on the development side is very much build on what has happened on the SRHR agenda domestically and bring that into a new initiative on SRHR and our development cooperation. And what the initiative does there, it consolidates and it strengthens Ireland's long-standing commitment to address sexual and gender-based violence, to improve maternal and newborn health, and to end the epidemic of HIV. But it also commits us to refocus our efforts in humanitarian settings. But in particular, our new focus is on adolescents. And we are committed to reducing adolescent birth rates and to ending harmful practices such as FGM and child marriage that have been referenced quite extensively here today, recognizing their profoundly negative impact on the health and well-being of very young and adolescent girls. And we agree with Professor Bloom on the need for evidence. And we think that access to good science-based evidence and information is at the heart of our approach. And it's reflected in our support for high-quality, age-appropriate, comprehensive sexuality programs that target adolescents and equip them with the information they need to make good decisions when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. And we complement these investments with support for healthcare services, including health system strengthening and the provision of contraceptive supplies. And we also provide targeted support for research and development to expand SRHR services to people of all ages. So let me just please conclude by reiterating that so much of what we are doing now has been driven and enabled by the extent to which adolescents and young people have made these issues a priority for legislators and policymakers. And so for that, I commend you and congratulate you and encourage you to stay the course and to keep this space an open and positive one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing the Government of Ireland's continued commitment to adolescent health and well-being, and for sharing the almost journey of centering them within IDC, International Development Corporation. I think the approach to reaching the furthest behind first is definitely something we should all be keeping at the forefront of our minds over the next 75 months. So we're going to do something a bit unorthodox. We thought about how to amplify the youth voices in this panel, and obviously with events like these, it's quite difficult to manage time and manage all the voices, but we're going to do something unorthodox by almost hosting a mini press briefing. So imagine these are the policymakers, well, not imagine, they are policymakers, and these are the young correspondents, and ultimately the young correspondents want to learn more about the efforts that are taken to advance their agendas and their policy priorities. So we've got a fantastic lineup of youth activists and advocates from a few countries, and I'm going to give them each 2 minutes to ask very pointed and specific questions to the honorable ministers and excellencies on the panel. Juanita from Bolivia, Imane from Morocco, Jeremiah from Zambia, Aisha from Pakistan, and Paul from Zimbabwe. A round of applause for our youth advocates. Juanita, I understand that you have a very specific question to the government of Colombia about operationalization of commitments. Would you like to take the floor and ask that question?
Hola, muy buenos días. Muy buenos días. Voy a hablar primero en español, porque ya que es mi lengua materna. Mi nombre es Juanita, soy de Bolivia y también soy lideresa juvenil. Y antes de hacer mi pregunta, quisiera nombrar algunos datos desde mi país, ya que en Bolivia, 1 de cada 4 menores de 18 años, mujeres, mantienen una unión temprana. También hay 92 embarazos por día entre la edad de 10 a 18 años de edad. Y se llega a convertir mi país uno de los más peligrosos para nacer siendo niña. También promover lo que es, perdón, mil disculpas. También otro tema, lo que quisiera hablar, es que en Bolivia actualmente se están quemando más de 5 millones de lo que son hectáreas de nuestro bosque. Y eso cómo afecta a nuestro país, a las niñas, cómo afecta en nuestra salud, en nuestra higiene. También en coordinación lo que es con Plan Internacional y otra activista, asocios feministas, se llega a concretar, ¿no?, para la erradicación de género y muchos de esos más. Lo que es, perdón, mil disculpas, estoy un poco nerviosa. Y mi pregunta va para la ministra Colombia. ¿Cuál podría ser la mejor manera de impedir en nuestros temas de salud, derechos sexuales y derechos reproductivos para que las niñas, adolescentes y jóvenes podamos ejercer nuestros derechos, ya que se debe invertir basado en nuestras propias experiencias como nosotros los jóvenes, lo que vivimos diariamente, ¿no? Y ya que es muy diferente vivirlos desde nuestras experiencias a ver cómo lo ven ustedes. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Juanita. And no worries of your nervousness. Thank you for amplifying your voice. I'm going to ask their excellencies and our honorable ministers to wait right until the end to respond collectively, if that's okay. Imane, I hear you have a question on the operationalization of commitments. Fancy word for getting things done. Shoot.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Iman Lakbashi. I'm a youth and gender equality advocate from Morocco and the Director of Network Engagement at the International Youth Alliance for Family Planning. In my work around adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, I've witnessed many of the barriers young people face in accessing critical services and information. I've also seen how policy commitments, while well-intentioned, don't always translate into meaningful change on the ground. Despite numerous global pledges to improve adolescents' SRHR, progress is slow, and the challenges remain particularly acute in under-resourced regions. So my question is for the Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports of the Republic of Bulgaria. How will the government of Bulgaria ensure that the commitments made regarding youth health and well-being are effectively implemented and monitored? And what mechanisms will be put in place to guarantee accountability and transparency? And how can young people be part of the process to ensure that these outcomes are both timely, impactful, and reflect their needs? Thank you.
Thank you, Mane. Really pointed question. Jeremiah, my brother from Zambia, I understand you have a very clear question on meaningful youth engagement in the context of policy delivery. Go.
Thank you so much, Levi. My question is to the Honorable Minister from Lesotho. I understand that meaningful youth engagement is something that has been mentioned throughout this conference. And it's clear that the young people want to be partners, not just beneficiaries. And in Zambia, likewise, we've been having conversations with different policymakers to translate these policies into commitments. With support from Foundation Partner, these organizations have been facilitated by organizations like Plan International, among others, but we still continue to see a gap between our commitments and the actual implementation. So my question is as follows. Honorable Minister, how do you intend to make it work from the young people's perspective? How are you going to embed the young people as partners in the delivery of CSE this regard, and ensuring that these commitments are translated into implementation? What are the mechanisms that will support the retention of the re-entered girls in school? And what happens to those girls who don't want to go back into mainstream education? Is there a plan for those? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Aisha, I understand that you have a question for the representative from Ireland. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Aisha Memon. I am the youth focal point of FP 2030 from Pakistan. We know that adolescents and youth are the future, and it is imperative that we ensure their health, rights, and well-being are prioritized. While substantial improvements have been made in education, maternal health, and access to the contraceptions, there remains a significant gap, particularly when it comes to violence against adolescent girls and access to the contraceptives. My question is simple, which is what measures are in place to ensure comprehensive sexual education is accessible in school and communities, and how are you addressing cultural and religious barriers that might hinder its implementation?
Thank you, Aisha. Sorry, I was a bit distracted by my co-producer. This is live, it's real time, folks. Meet the press. Paul, Zimbabwe, welcome. I understand that you have a question to Bulgaria as well. Peter, you're in high demand. Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Government of Bulgaria, Peter. I'm really honored for your commitment, 5 million to national youth programs. Yeah, I agree with you. Investments in mental health for adolescents actually, it brings triple yield. Actually, it improves adolescent well-being today, and it also ensures that there are future prospects of adolescent, and also ensures that there are improved outcomes in the future. But I just also want to say that HIV is not over yet. And integrating HIV, mental health, and sexual and reproductive health have been found to be effective. Data and evidence shows that. For example, PA providers, where I came from, Shandiri, it provides psychosocial support and counseling as young people living with HIV. And data has shown that 42% of adolescents being supported, there's 42% reduction in treatment failure, and there's also 62% reduction in depression and trauma. So my first question would be, would your government consider adopting a PA provider model that integrates HIV, mental health, and sexual reproductive health? Then my second question would
I think you only have one question.
Okay.
Sorry, tough crowd. This is a brilliant press call. I think that's a very clear statement, and definitely we can once we find the breakfast chef. Thank you, press call. That was fantastic and very, very substantive questions. And I think now we'll invite the honorables and excellencies for very succinct responses, focusing on some of the thematic issues that have been raised. I think, Paul, that HIV question in particular and keeping HIV on the agenda is so integral. If our representative from Ireland and Peter want to touch on that, that would be great. You specifically did bring on HIV in your remarks as well, Ireland. So if we could maybe start with Lesotho, Bulgaria, and move our way down. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much for all the questions that have been asked, but maybe I will concentrate on the Zambia, which was a bit specific to me. The first thing that we are doing is to establish youth clubs in schools. Those who are going to become compulsory to have youth clubs in school and youth leaders. So those ones are going to participate in the review of access to health centers, protocols, including the policies. Apart from that, we have structured our accountability program such that when the ministry accounts to Parliament in terms of these processes, number of youths are identified by the youths, and they do make representation to Parliament. That also influences the budgeting processes, which affects the youth directly. For the girls who are out of school and how do they come back, we have a policy that has been adopted by the cabinet in the last 2 months. After the policy, we are going to enact some of the provisions of the policy so that the schools will not reject girls that went out of the school because of the pregnancy issues. So that will be taken care of. It's still a long way to go because some of the schools are church schools. But once the policy is there and the law is there, it will become easier for us to implement those particular decisions. And of course, the engagement of the youth, what we have found is that because of the digital platforms, they are able to participate. And we also have to give them incentives to participate in the way that some of the youth leaderships from youth clubs, when they go for tertiary, when we award scholarships through government program, they will be part of that system. So that means having been a leader of the youth club, that will also be used to gain points in order to gain scholarships to the tertiary. So that is also becomes an incentive for the youth to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very succinct, Honorable Minister. Deputy Minister Peter, you have 2 questions.
Yes, very quickly. Thank you so much for your question. I think it's absolutely crucial to talk about accountability monitoring And in our case, what we have, it's a biannual report on showing the progress of what we have done for the young people at the national level. And we do hope that we'll be able to integrate more local examples in that. And by 2026, we do hope to launch a new monitoring systems in order to be able to really track the progress lively in terms that we can be also flexible enough to change in the different frameworks, including the strategy, so we can provide more opportunities for young people specifically for this specific year. And coming back to the HIV question, I think it's absolutely crucial, and apologize for not mentioning this because it's important to integrate not only mental support, but social support. And we do hope that in partnership with the Ministry of Health in Bulgaria, we'll be able to provide more opportunities for young people in terms of HIV prevention, but also young people living with HIV. And I think there is a great model that has been implemented in Moldova. And I'm mentioning it because Eastern Europe, as we all know, it's on the rise in terms of HIV. So therefore, we do hope that the youth clinics that are spread out there at the national level will be able to learn from that model and to be integrated in our youth centers in Bulgaria.
Thank you, Peter. That was incredibly succinct. Paul, please do follow up with Deputy Minister Peter on your point on peer education. Peter used to lead a youth network on peer education in his previous life. Arlene, please, could you respond to the question posed to you by Juanita?
Muchas gracias, Juanita. Voy a revertir al inglés por razones de tiempo, pero agradezco mucho la pregunta. I think I have several things to say. First, I've mentioned in my first intervention the high-level offices that have been created to create more robust and all-of-government approaches to youth rights. But also, my government is firmly committed to what we could call participatory public policy processes in which all sectors of our population, including youth, in particular those most marginalized and vulnerable, have a key role in deciding what public policy should look like. And I think in the context of a crisis of democracy worldwide, creating a stake for youth in public policies, in addition to the top-down policies that I've already mentioned, is fundamental to guaranteeing any type of resilience and legitimacy. So that's the first answer. Second, we've created a specific international cooperation table for donors related to youth in which youth participate. And just to respond directly to the question about Bolivia, which you've brought up, South-South cooperation, I think, is also a fundamental tool for going about addressing these differences that we see between countries in a region such as Latin America in relation to sexual reproductive health and rights, among other types of youth rights. Two more points. Colombia is hosting on November 24th the first global conference to put an end to violence against children and adolescents in Bogota, where we hope to strike agreements and commitments among member states, but also to foment an international youth movement with the goal of strengthening, again, the types of accountability mechanisms worldwide that we're seeking to achieve in our own country. And finally, just let me echo what others have said about evidence-based policy. My government is firmly committed to creating policy that is evidence-driven. We hear a lot of evidence, and yet member states, are wont sometimes to listen to that evidence. I think youth in particular have to continue insisting upon the need to pay attention to the evidence and for governments to implement that evidence with an eye to creating better public policy with your participation and your demands.
Thank you very much, Arlene. That was super useful. Youth citizenship again in action. And I think we'll learn more from you about the upcoming conference on preventing violence against children and adolescents. Sarah, if you could please respond to Aisha's question.
Right. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your question. And I mean, I think I'll actually echo quite a lot of what I think my previous panelists have said. I mean, the issues that you raise are multifaceted. There isn't a single solution. There isn't a single kind of blueprint that you can arrive into a particular context and say, this is how you are going to tackle all these different elements. So really what I would say is that all elements of public policy need to play their part. This is an issue of human rights. It's an issue of gender. It's an issue of health. It's an issue of education. It's an issue about the future of young women in particular, but of all adolescents. And in that sense, we do need multi-sectoral approaches, and we're working a lot with our international partners, WHO, UNESCO, and others, to really see how to build those multi-sectoral approaches and to work with governments in the context in which they're in, and not to arrive with kind of prepackaged solutions, but really to see how to embed these processes and to embed them in national governments, but also with young people and in public policy processes more broadly in the democratic context. Because we see this domestically, this isn't something that happens once and it's done. It's an ongoing conversation, and there's always changes, improvements, learning, and ways in which the evidence can be brought in to bring in appropriate changes there. So I think in particular on comprehensive sexuality education, there's a lot of work that needs to be done about cultural sensitivity and context-specific approaches. I think somebody mentioned earlier, not everybody wants to call it that, but there are many ways in which the issues for young people can be addressed in ways that can be modified to help with the particular context in which they're taking place. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was incredibly clear and direct. We've reached the end of the segment. Time flies when you're having fun and you're learning about incredible, bold, courageous policymaking and leadership at a country level. I'd like to thank our honorable ministers and their excellencies who have joined us. You can feel free to take your seats once more. And thank you to our youth advocates, and thank you to the vibrant audience for giving us some energy and insights throughout this panel. Shakira, over to you once more.
So your moderator, who's a plant at the podium, has returned. Thank you, Levi. So we're going to jump into the final segment of today's discussion. But before we do, and I do this not on behalf of any of the organizations, but as someone who's working in this space. Deputy Minister, Honorable Peter, if you'd allow me to ask you a personal question, how old are you? Or how young are you? 33. So stand up for us. Because for those of you who know Peter or Honorable Minister, and I have to get used to protocol, he's worked in this space for a long time on comprehensive sexuality education. And seeing Peter get into a political space and now enable a commitment of 5 million euros is incredible. Young people lead. So big round of applause to you. I'd also like to ask one more time for Honorable Minister Rapapa to stand up for us. I'd also like to ask Ambassador Tikna. Peter, I'm going to make you stand one more time. And Ms. Sarah Hunt to stand again and to face all of us. And I'm pausing for a reason. Yes, you can give a round of applause. But I'm pausing this program for a reason. And the reason is that we need political champions. We really do. So one, we celebrate you for adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, but we also want to give you the responsibility. Go back to your countries, get more commitments for us, and speak to other governments. Who's with me on that? You can now take your seats, and thank you for indulging me or engaging with me briefly on that. We'll now shift, as I said, into the final segment. I have lots of problems this morning. I know you all are hungry. We need to keep to time, but I think this is important. Closing off with a conversation, and I like the caption of this closing panel. It's called Closing the Deal, and we have 4 incredible speakers with us. The very first is Ximena Argalo, the Executive Director of Choice for You Sexuality. We're then going to have Dr. Bruce Allywood, the ADG for the World Health Organization, who will be stepping in for Dr. Barbosa from the World Health Organization. Dr. Gulhem Goncalves Duarte, I hope I haven't butchered your name, from Unite Parliamentarians. I just followed you on Twitter. Nice to see you in person. Okay, and then we've got Linda Weiser from the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. So as Linda makes her way up, I'll already start to share the question for our esteemed panelists. And I'd like you to take 2 minutes each, if I can give you that challenge this morning. 2 minutes each, right? Okay. So, Simona, we have the Pact for the Future. It's been adopted. How can we deliver on this? How can member states deliver on this? We're now going to shift to Dr. Bruce Allywood, and I hope I'm saying your surname correctly, who's from the World Health Organization. A lot of commitments have been made, but as we leave this room today, what's the commitment that the WHO is making to advance adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights? But it's not just adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. It's adolescent health. It's all part of adolescent health. So we'd love to hear from you on this.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for a chance to engage today and say a few words. I'm very sorry we've lost our regional director, Yarbus, but I'm delighted that this has given me an empty seat to be able to, first of all, if I might, just a huge thank you to all of you, the panelists, the speakers, the questioners, and the others who've just inputted to the event today. I have been listening intently, learned a lot, which is important because I host 3 of our departments and divisions that actually support this entire agenda. So huge thank you to all for the advice and guidance I've gotten. You'll be delighted to know as well, you're going to get a little bit raw from me because I actually don't have prepared notes as a result of sitting here on such short notice. But to our moderator's question, I think we had a very clear steer on the priorities between the 2 panels and reaffirms what we all think. First, and Professor Bloom, thanks for hammering it again and again. The evidence, first of all, on the need for action, but then also on what works. So incredibly important, especially in the resource-constrained environments that we're in. The second thing we heard repeatedly was around the need for inclusive processes of partnerships to make sure that piece of it works. About accountability mechanisms, we've got lots of commitments and lots of promises, and the action, as we heard from some of the younger speakers just now, has not always come through. We've got to expand our programming. We have lots of evidence about what works. We heard in the last panel some great examples, and from our own region, I think Dr. Yarbus would have highlighted, we've seen a 20% reduction in young pregnancies as a result of the application of some very concrete and proven methods. But also we need to be agile and flexible as we evolve. So a couple of commitments from WHO. I am going to get there. First of all, WHO, we are behind the global agenda on universal health coverage. You cannot have universal health coverage without adolescent sexual health, sexual reproductive health and rights. So we get it, and that anchors our agenda. It is part of achieving UHC. Now, how can we advance it? We are a normative agency first and foremost, which means generating the evidence, promoting that evidence that works, and we will continue that role as we go forward in the on this agenda. The second thing we are, importantly, is we are a political organization. We have 194 member states, countries. That is a very powerful platform for advancing not only the technical agenda and expanding technical programming with our member states on the ground, but also for advancing legislation, the laws, and promoting those other fundamental pieces to move this agenda. So we will take our normative levers, our political levers, but we are also a convening agency, and we provide a platform for voices that have to be part of this agenda and included. And we are already moving on that agenda. Dr. Tedros has established a youth council, as we talked about in the youth summit yesterday, to bring young people into WHO to advise us, tell us what's important to them, tell us how we could be doing and working this agenda better, and engage them in that process. We will continue that, and we will continue to challenge our member states to bring youth delegates as part of their delegation, to be part of shaping the work of our organization as well. So we heard the priorities loud and clear from you. We will commit, and we are committed, as I just laid across. We will use our 3 big levers to advance this agenda as well. We are with you because we stand for universal health coverage, equity, and rights in health. We cannot achieve that without adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bruce. And you've touched on the World Health Organization Youth Council, and since the entire pact, the Summit of the Future, is focused on multilateralism and the role of young people and adolescents specifically in global governance is incredibly important. So, for me, that's one of the takeaways from some of the commitments that you've outlined. We're now going to shift to Dr. Duarte from the United Parliamentarians Network for Global Health. Dr. Duarte, give us a parliamentarian perspective. When and how does adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights fit into the agenda?
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like also to join my voices thanking the organization of this event, especially the leadership of governments of Chile, Colombia, and Ireland, but also all the partners in WHO, and of course the youth leaders that are here present. That gave us amazing perspectives which are to be heard. And today, indeed, we've heard powerful calls for action and commitments that should reshape the future of adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. But commitments alone won't change lives. We know that. Action and accountability will. Parliamentarians have the unique responsibility to hold governments to account. This isn't just about policy, it's about safeguarding the future of our children and our adolescents. And indeed, adolescents are the leaders of tomorrow, but also of today, as Mariam rightly remembered us, and yet too often we fail them today. Vulnerable groups face additional hurdles to access basic health care, and they are the ones accumulating layers of disadvantage, locked out of every services meant to protect them. We cannot allow our laws, our systems, and our societies to be complicit in these disenfranchisement. And this is where the legislative power can become a force for freedom, recognition, and well-being. So at Unite, a global network of parliamentarians, we are currently over 550 current and former parliamentarians, all over 120 countries. And we try to work relentlessly to ensure that laws protect young people rather than restrict their rights. We advocate for the kind of policies that guarantee access to contraceptives, menstrual products, and comprehensive SRHR education. And these are not privileges. Indeed, they are basic human rights. Our parliamentarians are also societal leaders, and at Unite, we try to leverage this power to shift public discourse and stigma and normalize conversations around contraception, abortion, STI, testing, and menstruation. But more than that, we aim to legislate to assure access and equity, whether it's increasing funding for services, holding government hearings to demand accountability, or drafting evidence-based policies that prioritize the needs of young people. In Unite, we've seen the power of bringing together lawmakers, civil society, and youth. One example that I can give you comes from Angola, where we facilitated the first ever meeting between the chair of Parliamentary Committee on HIV and patient representatives. The chair had been in office for four years without ever meeting those directly affected. Now, thanks to this dialogue, he meets regularly with various stakeholders. And this is democracy in action, a whole of society approach that is crucial to ensuring laws reflect the realities of those they serve. Another key contribution has been pushing to make SRHR issues a priority within the health committees of parliaments. And a third one, the final one, is in countries where subcommittees such as global health didn't exist, we've successfully created them in some countries. This is the kind of change that parliamentarians are capable of driving and promote. The latest technical evidence built on decades of research should further motivate us for action. It is clear, adolescents SRHR is not separate from their broader health and rights as decision makers in their communities. We have more evidence than ever before to guide us, and it must propel us toward urgent and sustained action. The time to act is now. We call on all stakeholders to step up efforts, increase investment, and prioritize adolescents as a cornerstone of sustainable development. We must ensure that every child and adolescent, regardless of background, has access to comprehensive SRHR services and education. Because if we fail to protect the rights of adolescents today, we jeopardize the future of societies tomorrow. As we like to joke with the name of our organization, it's time to unite.
Dr. Duarte, thank you. You've taken me back a couple of years to my work in South Africa, and you're reminding me, and I'm hoping the young people in the room are listening to you, because what's slightly delinked from young people and those involved in the agenda is understanding parliamentary processes. like parliamentary committees. So again, it would be really great for us post this meeting to think about how do we get adolescent sexual and reproductive health into some of these domestic processes, and how do we also have youth championing in that? And I know, Levi, you're behind a lot of it in South Africa as well, but there are many closed doors, and how do we open them up for young people? Linda, I'm now going to turn to you to give us really the final words of this session that we've had over the 2.5 hours this morning. Linda Wazard is the Global Director of Equity, Gender and Youth at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, CIF. And we have political champions in the room, but we also have philanthropic champions in the room. And one of them is Linda. You and your team are spearheading sexual and reproductive health and rights for all types of populations, not just adolescents. And so my prayer now and every night going to sleep is that I hope your pockets will be very deep. I hope domestic financing pockets will be very deep. I hope all pockets will be deep. But my question to you is not about how deep your pockets are. Over the years, working and championing sexual and reproductive health and rights, what are some of the lessons you can share with the room in terms of how do we mobilize these resources?
Thank you so much, Shakira. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I am the last person standing between you and delicious breakfast outside, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet. But just to start, I think two things hold really true for CIF. One is that we don't just see adolescents and young people as recipients of our programs. They're absolutely our partners and co-leaders in advancing progressive change. And the second one is, as we've heard today, we see SRHR as a critical pillar of more comprehensive package, really about supporting adolescents to thrive and live their best lives. So alongside SRHR, we also invest in education, we invest in economic empowerment strategies. All of these together really ensure that adolescents are able to fulfill their dreams. With regards to SRHR specifically, Shakira, you said we have been investing quite a lot in this space. Last year, I think we dispersed about $115 million in the space, including for work that targets adolescents. So to just name a couple, for example, our partnership on Adolescents 360 in Nigeria, Kenya, and Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, it's called the RISE program, which is all about providing adolescent girls with access to family planning. We've been able to do a lot there in terms of delivering millions of services to these adolescent girls. But then also partnerships with young feminists. We had Choice talk about this. Young feminists like the Nala Feminist Collective that work with us in mobilizing commitment makers in Africa for SRHR. I think for us, the lessons learned are actually three, and we've heard them loud and clear in this room, not just for us, but for philanthropy. One is around centering equity, really making sure that we are making efforts intentionally to reach the hard to reach and the more marginalized, and that we're thoughtful about this. And this is work that we have started 3 years ago, and we continue to do more of this, including in new regions in Africa that we will be working in. The second thing is address social norms and address them intentionally. We've learned a tremendous amount from our partners in Kenya, for example, so the Luala Community Alliance or Ujamaa, about what it takes to really address issues of toxic masculinities or gender-based violence. Again, we intend to be much more thoughtful and intentional moving forward in addressing this. And then I think the last point for us is really about meaningful youth partnership. Again, we've been learning a tremendous amount from youth leaders like Choice, other leaders of the Generation Equality SRHR Action Coalition, which Shakira knows very well, and partners like PMNCH and the Adolescent and Youth Constituency to really show us what good can and should look like. And so really making this the center of our efforts is critical. It's not just the right thing to do, we'll make for better investments. So these are some of the lessons learned, Shakira. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Linda. And a big round of applause for Linda. And Linda, I hope you don't mind me sharing this story, but quite often many of us talk about donors and funders and how it's always top down and you know, I'm not just saying this because you're one of the supporters of generation equality, but I remember the first time I had met Linda a few years ago, we sat down at a She Decides meeting in Belgium, and I said to her, this is my wish list to make the Action Coalition work. But the moral of the story is that it's so refreshing to be able to work with a philanthropy or someone in the funding space who listens and who asks what's needed in designing a project and program. So Linda, again, sorry if I, divulge that, but I think it's been an incredible relationship to be able to see, especially for me as a young person, because I've been in spaces where it has been top down, but seeing the shift in the way SIF approaches, the donor landscape, as well as several other donors who are in the room, is really incredible. So we're going to close off now, and Linda was the second last. I'm going to throw a few more things into the mix, if you'd allow me. The one is to offer a quick recap. So first and foremostly, Honorable Helen Clark had said this morning, we're at a turning point in history. And the reason we're at a turning point in history is, yes, the Pact of the Future has been adopted. But when we look 10, 15 years down the line, what will this have meant? Similar to ICPD and Beijing. Within the Pact, Action 8 specifically speaks to gender equality, and subsection F speaks to the universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I want everyone to give a round of applause because that's a win. That's a win for everyone in this room. And, many of us who sit in member state discussions know that it is such a big win. So thank you. We had the UNFPA Deputy Executive Director talk about the power of transformative adolescent sexual and reproductive health programming, which through the special issue, we have seen the evidence around. We then had commitments from the governments of Lesotho, Bulgaria, Colombia, and Ireland, to list a few this morning, and that's important, as well as the World Health Organization. Again, a big congratulations to the researchers who pulled off taking stock of adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, looking at the trends. I had a look at the supplement, and a couple of key things had jumped up out at me to get you to go and read it. They talked a lot about, the authors speak a lot about gender transformative programming. They talk about context-specific interventions. They talk about the evidence policy action link. They also talk about the risk and protective factors. So if you're looking for a resource on adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, go off and read the supplement. I then want to thank my co-moderator, Levi Singh from the SRHR Africa Trust, among many other hats that you wear. I'm thrilled to be moderating with you, working with you again. I'm not so thrilled that you didn't tell me you coming to New York and bring things for me from South Africa in terms of some of the snacks I needed, etc. So I'll catch up with you on that. We want to thank the governments of Colombia, Chile, and Ireland specifically for co-sponsoring this event. There are multiple co-sponsors. You can see them on the program, including the World Health Organization and PMNCH. I'd then like to announce that there is brunch and networking. There were questions that were unanswered. There are things that you probably want to speak about, or you should speak about, because we have the opportunity. So brunch is served. We also, I understand, have an art exhibition, which will be directly outside this room. I believe many will, direct us to that. And then finally, and most importantly, because this is who we're speaking about, and this is what we're speaking about. So you've heard my voice, you've heard Levi's voice, you've heard excellent speakers' voices, but on behalf of Generation X and Generation Z, thank you for joining us today.